Look, I'm going to be honest with you about something before I even get into this. I almost didn't make this video, not because the story isn't worth telling, but because I wasn't sure I had the right words for it yet. And then I saw that image in my head again. A man standing in a hotel hallway, asking the front desk for one more night, then another, not because he forgot to pack, not because his flight was delayed, because his little brother was still waiting for a phone call, and he physically could not make himself leave. That image broke something open in me, and I realized I didn't need perfect words. I just needed to tell the truth about what happened. What the NFL draft did to Shedeur Sanders this year was one of the most publicly visible, most analytically confusing, and most personally revealing stories to come out of a draft in years. And I don't mean revealing about Shedeur, I mean revealing about the process, about the people running it. And ultimately, accidentally, almost beautifully, revealing about who Shedeur Sanders actually is when the entire machinery of professional football decides to grind against him. Let me start where most people aren't starting, because everybody wants to talk about the picks and the rounds and the slide. I want to talk about what was happening behind closed doors before any of that, because that's where the real story begins. Every year, prospects go through pre-draft interviews with NFL teams. It's standard. You sit in a room with coaches, GMs, scouts, and you talk football, scheme recognition, situational reads. How do you handle pressure coverage? What do you see when the defense disguises a coverage shell late? That's what it's supposed to be. An honest football evaluation between an organization that needs a quarterback and a player who has spent his entire life preparing to be one. That's the deal. That's the purpose of the room. That is not what happened to Shedeur Sanders. Jarvis Landry said it publicly, and I want you to sit with the weight of who that is saying it. This is not some random voice on the internet. This is a veteran who has spent over a decade operating at the highest level of this league. He has been in buildings. He has seen how organizations think. He has enough credibility and enough distance from any personal stake in this situation that when he speaks about what Shedeur experienced, it carries a very different kind of gravity than fan commentary or hot takes. And what Landry said was that Shedeur Sanders never received a fair shot. Not as a feeling, as a fact, as a specific, grounded observation about what those pre-draft interview rooms were actually designed to do. The questions weren't about football. That's the part that keeps echoing in my head. The questions were engineered to manufacture conflict, to pressure him into saying something damaging about his father, to get him to create distance between himself and his own coaching background, or to speak critically about teammates he hadn't even met yet. The goal wasn't to evaluate his football mind. The goal was to provoke him, to find the crack, to get him emotional or defensive, or to say one thing, just one thing, that could be clipped and circulated and used as a retroactive justification for decisions that, I would argue, had already been made before he walked in the door. Think about what that actually means. You've spent your entire life working toward this moment. You've put in every rep, every film session, every hour of preparation imaginable. You walk into that room knowing your football IQ can hold up against anyone in that draft class. And instead of being asked about football, you're being handed live grenades and watched to see if you'll drop one. Here's the thing that genuinely moves me. He didn't drop a single one. Not in one room, not across any of those conversations. He went through every one of those meetings and gave the people sitting across from him absolutely nothing they could weaponize. Every relationship he needed to protect stayed protected. His reputation came out the other side of those rooms completely intact. And when Landry described this, he used the word prepared, but I think that sells it short. Preparation handles the questions you can see coming. You can rehearse the football stuff. You can have advisors mock interview you. What you cannot rehearse your way through is a room specifically constructed to find the place where your composure cracks. That's not a coaching problem. That's a character problem, meaning you either have that quality in you or you don't. Shedeur has it, completely, and he showed it in rooms where showing it was the hardest possible thing to do. Landry also addressed something that I think was on a lot of people's minds, whether the experience damaged Shedeur psychologically, whether sliding that far, in that public a forum, in front of that large an audience, did something to his internal confidence. And the way Landry shut that question down told me everything I needed to hear. He wasn't gentle about it. He wasn't offering consolation or soft reassurance. He was almost impatient with the premise, like someone being asked to validate a concern they find genuinely ridiculous. He said Shedeur is a confident player, and the tone behind that statement wasn't encouragement, it was description. Factual, first-hand, precise description of someone he knows and has observed. That confidence isn't branding. It's not a social media persona. It's not something that gets carefully calibrated before press interactions and then stored away when the cameras turn off. It is the structural foundation underneath everything Shedeur does, on and off a football field. It's load-bearing. And Landry's sharpest insight, the one I keep returning to, is this. That specific, unbreakable confidence is exactly what built Shedeur's career to this point. The idea that he should have softened it or packaged it differently or made it more palatable for the people who felt destabilized by it, that is precisely the wrong lesson to extract from everything that happened. The confidence doesn't owe anyone an apology. It needs to be pointed at a football field in Cleveland and turned completely loose. Now I want to bring in a completely different voice, because Leonard Fournette's perspective on this adds something that I find genuinely moving in a way I didn't expect. Fournette talked about the TCU game, that Colorado game, as the inflection point. The moment his casual awareness of Shedeur Sanders became real, active, involuntary investment. And the way he described it had this raw authenticity to it, the kind you can't manufacture. He talked about staying up until 1 in the morning, watching Colorado film with the kind of locked-in attention you reserve for things that have personally gotten to you. That's not obligatory support from someone in Shedeur's orbit. That is a professional athlete watching another athlete perform and being pulled in against his own expectations, being compelled by the actual football happening beneath all the cultural noise surrounding that Colorado program. Because that's the thing people kept missing when they talked about Deion Sanders' Colorado era. Yes, there was spectacle. Yes, there were cameras and celebrities and a media circus orbiting the program constantly. But underneath all of that, there were football games. Tight games. Games where the defense had Shedeur's number and the situation was designed to expose whatever limitations existed in his game. And he delivered, again and again, in exactly the kinds of moments where a player's real ceiling announces itself. Fournette saw it, and once you see it, you can't unsee it. That's how Shedeur Sanders works on people who watch him closely and honestly. But then there's Junior. Deion Sanders Jr.'s account of what those draft days actually felt like from inside that hotel room is the most emotionally unguarded piece of this entire story. And I want to give it the full weight it deserves, because I don't think most coverage has. Junior had planned to be there for day 1. That was the plan. Show up for round 1, celebrate his brother getting his name called, and go home. Simple. Clean. The kind of day you plan for when you believe in someone the way he believes in Shedeur. And then round 1 ended. His name wasn't called. So Junior extended his checkout. One more night. Day 2 came. Same silence. He extended again, then again, not because his schedule magically opened up, because leaving felt like something he wasn't capable of doing. You don't walk out the door when your brother is sitting in that. You just don't. There's no version of that where you can live with yourself afterward. The word he used was pain. And I want to stay with that word for a second, because I think it's precise in a way that frustration or anger wouldn't be. Pain is the specific weight that settles into you when someone you love is going through something publicly difficult and you are completely, helplessly powerless to stop it or absorb any portion of it. You can't take it from them. You can't speed it past them. You can't do a single thing except be present and watch it happen in real time, round after round, hour after hour. He talked about reaching for his phone to text Shedeur and then stopping, staring at the screen, trying to figure out what words would be right and coming up empty, not wanting to make the weight heavier by drawing direct attention to it, but feeling that pull anyway, because silence in a moment like that can feel like its own kind of abandonment, even when you're physically in the same building. There are no right words when someone you love is being publicly passed over in slow motion, but the instinct to reach toward them anyway is almost overwhelming because doing nothing feels unbearable. And then something shifted. Junior said that at a certain point, as the rounds kept advancing and the slide kept extending well beyond any distance that football evaluation alone could account for, it stopped feeling like a setback in his mind and started registering on a different frequency entirely. He referenced the hardening of Pharaoh's heart. And I don't want that to get absorbed as rhetorical decoration, because I don't think it was meant as decoration. The idea is this, that sometimes the door being slammed against someone, repeatedly, publicly, in front of millions of people, is not the final verdict on that person's worth. It's the architecture of a story that couldn't have been built any other way. A story that required exactly that specific weight and exactly that specific public witness to mean what it's ultimately going to mean. And then Junior said the thing that I believe will define how people look back on this moment years from now. He said the plan backfired. Whatever was operating behind the scenes during those draft days, whatever combination of coordinated resistance or individual organizational decisions that compounded into something larger, the actual effect was the complete opposite of what any of it might have intended to produce. Instead of reducing Shedeur's public profile, the slide amplified it. Instead of cooling the broader investment in his career, it created investment where none existed before. People who had been neutral crossed a line they hadn't planned to cross. People who had been actively skeptical watched round after round pass and felt something they weren't expecting. They wanted him to succeed, not because they were already in his corner, because what they were watching felt wrong in a way that activated something real and not easily dismissed. And once that feeling activates in enough people, it doesn't go away quietly. Junior watched it happen in real time. Players across multiple locker rooms, people with zero prior personal connection to Shedeur, became actively invested in his story simply because of what they witnessed during those days. Major platforms shifted the tone of their coverage mid-draft. Voices that had been building cases against his readiness went quiet or reversed course entirely. And juniors read on all of it. The read I find most compelling and most honest is that the net outcome is more valuable for Shedeur's career than a celebrated top 5 selection would have produced. The underdog standing he carries into Cleveland right now is not assigned. It's not constructed by a PR team or packaged for consumption. It was earned publicly under the most visible circumstances available to a young player entering this league. And for someone with his specific psychological makeup, that's not a burden. That is fuel. There was one more thing Junior said that I want to close on because it speaks to something beneath all of this, beneath the draft story, beneath the Cleveland situation, beneath all the external noise and analysis and commentary. He recalled a conversation at a fair in Dallas where real estate came up, the kind of financial diversification talk that gets directed at young athletes at every stage of their development. What do you plan to invest in? What's your long-term financial vision? Normal questions. And Shedeur's response was immediate and left absolutely no room for interpretation. He didn't care about real estate. Football was what he cared about. That was it. No elaboration needed. Junior's larger point was that people persistently and fundamentally underestimate the depth of that focus. Not the surface-level commitment that every elite athlete can project when the cameras are running. The actual constitutional life-organizing degree to which Shedeur Sanders is about football. That kind of singular focus doesn't fracture under a painful draft experience. It doesn't get redirected by external treatment or media narratives or organizational politics or public opinion. It doesn't wait for circumstances to be favorable before it fully engages. It runs through everything because the commitment driving it isn't conditional on the situation being fair. It never was. So here's what I keep returning to when I absorb all of these perspectives together. What Landry said about a process rigged against composure. What Fournette said about being unable to stop watching. What Junior said about the hotel and the pain and the slow realization that those awful days were going to mean something none of them could fully see in the middle of living through them. The picture these voices paint is completely consistent. They're all describing the same human being. A player whose confidence is structural rather than performed. A player whose football obsession is the organizing principle of how he actually lives, not a talking point deployed strategically in interviews. A player who maintained absolute groundedness in rooms specifically designed to make groundedness impossible. Here's what I think is the most important football insight buried underneath all of this. The composure Shedeur held through those pre-draft meetings where the explicit goal was provocation, that is the exact same quality that will allow him to stand in a road stadium with 80,000 hostile fans and deliver the throw anyway. The mental steadiness he carried while watching himself fall past picks that couldn't be justified on any honest football basis. That is the exact same quality that will carry him through a fourth quarter deficit, without that deficit becoming internal weight that corrupts the decision-making. These things aren't compartmentalized. They are the same thing expressed in different environments. Character under pressure in one context is character available in every context. The draft process, for all its ugliness and all the pain it produced in a hotel hallway in a city Shedeur was supposed to be celebrating in, did something it almost certainly did not intend to do. It ran him through one of the most visible public pressure tests available to a young player entering this league, and it let everyone watching see exactly who he is when everything is working against him. He did not break. He didn't give anyone the reaction they were waiting for. He didn't hand out the convenient cover that so many people were clearly hoping he would provide. He walked through the entire thing and came out the other side carrying something no 5th overall pick narrative could have ever built for him. He carries genuine, widespread, hard-won public investment from across the league. From veterans who understand what they witnessed, from players in locker rooms who had no prior stake and made a conscious choice about whose story they wanted to see win. He carries a brother who kept extending his hotel checkout past every reasonable deadline and now looks back at those brutal days and sees the opening chapter of something that was always going to be worth it. The NFL thought the draft was the verdict on Shedeur Sanders. What it actually turned out to be was the setup, and he is only just beginning to write the rest.